Good evening, everyone. What an auspicious day this is. You know, none of us will ever experience another 100-year or 200-year anniversary of Master's coming. This is for each of us a unique event in our lives. And it was a unique event in the life of the world, one might say, when Master came to these shores and began his mission. Thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you for joining us, and we also want to thank all the people who have helped make this a beautiful day. Our team in the East Coast, New York, Rhode Island, Boston, who led us through a beautiful day today, and we have so much to share with you, as you will see later in our program this evening, a really remarkable video put together by all of our Ananda centers and communities in the West and in Assisi. So we hope you'll enjoy it. And this is just a wonderful time. Even though the world is going through tests and trials, let's never forget that the divine grace has come to guide us, to show us the way through whatever clouds of confusion come, and to show us the way to peace and joy. So let's begin with the prayer.
Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, great masters, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Guru, Paramhansa Yogananda Ji, saints of all religions, we humbly bow to you all. Beloved friend and guide, Swami Kriyananda. Master, we thank you again and again for your great mission to bring these teachings to us, to America, to the West, to the world. What you have done is already changing the world and will continue to do so for centuries to come. Great Masters, we thank you for watching out for us, for guiding us, and for loving us. Om. Peace. Amen. We'll have a very brief meditation, and then we'll follow that with a couple of songs. Sit upright and get centered in your spine, and especially at the spiritual eye. Let go of everything else except the thought of holding your attention on Master and kneeling in gratitude before him and opening yourself to his wisdom and his love. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Now we'll listen to two songs that were recorded during the 50th celebration, the 50-year anniversary of Ananda's founding.
They've haunted my slumber and called that speak silence. They whisper, come find me. You'll never know true love if you stay. Now I seek them in the winter time. Oh, I seek them in the spring. Those two dark eyes draw my heart away to where sun and moon sing. I laugh now in the summertime when ripples on the river play. I laugh soaring with the meadowlarks. Love has made my heart gay. I laugh soaring with the meadowlarks. Love has made my heart gay. I've known them forever. They've haunted my slumber and called to me out of the deeps of space. The love that they promised has helped me remember another time, a caring embrace. Dark eyes in the morning, dark eyes in the evening, dark eyes in the starlight at end of day. Dark eyes that speak silence, they whisper, come find me. You'll never know true love if you stay. Now I seek them in the winter time. Oh, I seek them in the spring. Those two dark eyes draw my heart away to where sun and moon sing. I laugh now in the summertime when ripples on the river play. I laugh soaring with the meadowlarks. Love has made my heart gay. I laugh soaring with the meadowlarks. Love has made my heart gay. I've known them forever. They've haunted my slumber and called to me out of the deeps of space. The love that they promise has helped me remember another time, a caring embrace. Another time, a caring embrace.
Life is a dream, time like a stream carries our burdens away. Never despair, joys everywhere, love can befriend you today. Free from all care, like birds on the air, soar above griefs and worries, seek joy and be gay. Often on earth, things of great worth, worldly ambitions defy. Sometimes a friend helps us ascend up from life's cares to the sky. Love is a star, though shining afar, It can guide us and help us toward light to draw nigh.
Life is a dream, time like a stream, carries our burdens away. Never despair, joys everywhere, love can befriend you today. Free from all care, like birds on the air, soar above griefs and worries, seek joy and be gay. Often on earth, things of great worth, worldly ambitions defy. Sometimes a friend helps us ascend up from life's cares to the sky. Love is a star, though shining afar. It can guide us and help us toward light to draw nigh. Love is a star, though shining afar. It can guide us and help us toward light to draw nigh.
Beautiful songs. I love that song, Dark Eyes. All of you, I'm sure, or most of you know the story that after Master's passing of Master's mother, he missed that womanly, compassionate, loving embrace that he had felt in his childhood from her, missed her greatly, and really suffered on a human level with the loss of her going on. And then he had a vision in which Divine Mother came to him and said that the eyes that you loved so much in your mother, I have watched over you with those same eyes through many mothers, and I shall always watch over you. And so it is, the divine is always embracing us, although few of us are fortunate enough or advanced enough to have a vision of the Divine Mother. Nonetheless, whether we know it or not, the Divine Mother and Heavenly Father is always watching over us. And in that embrace of us, in the caring of us, Babaji and Jesus are also watching over us. Master said that essentially they're in charge of the spiritual development and evolution of the whole planet. And so I know that these are troubling times on many levels, and sometimes we can get very caught up, perhaps concerned, worried about events, things that are happening. But let's remember that it's always God, and in this case, Babaji and Jesus, who are in charge of this planet. When Swamiji was leaving Dhyana in charge, Nayaswami Dhyana in charge in India, she was concerned about being able to do what was needed to be done. And he said very simply, let's always remember, this work is not your work. This work is not my work. This work is the work of Babaji and of Master, and they'll take care of things. And so they have. They, knowing that exactly the times that we were going to be in, that we were facing, they sent Master, this great avatar, to come to this country, to the West, and to bring the teachings that would help us get through these times exactly as they are now. They know what's going on. We don't need to worry so much as we do. Put everything, put your faith in them, and put your faith in Master. After all, his was a very special mission to the West. And so he arrived in Boston, at Boston Harbor, 100 years ago today, and disembarked and began his time in the West. And it grew slowly at first. He had his talk with the World Congress of Religious Liberals, and from that he got some speaking engagements. But it took him a while for his magnetism to reach out and to embrace and touch America. Because America, imagine America 100 years ago. We think we have problems now. They had more problems. They were just coming out of World War I, and it was a time of turbulence then also. They had too just faced a worldwide pandemic, which was even more serious than the one we're facing. Nonetheless, I don't want to dwell on that. I just want to say that they know what they're doing. And so Master began reaching out, he began speaking, and then gradually his real mission started. We're going to see, well, an amazing video. So you're in for a delight, and Davy and I will speak relatively briefly because the main attraction tonight is Master, of course, but this wonderful video done by all of the centers in America. And so we'll see that in just a little while. But you'll see from that, as Master made his tours around the country, he had this, he had the need to reach out to as broad of a spectrum of people as he possibly could. And he used the most modern methodology that was available to him. He advertised in newspapers, he put up flyers, he had posters, he had all kinds of, he went on radio later, toward the end of his life, he went on television. He did everything that he could to reach out widely. But more than reaching out widely, he had to adapt his message to fit a different consciousness. And so in India, he would be speaking on deep subjects. In America, he spoke on how to have everlasting youth, how to have better relationships, how to succeed in business. And so he was putting the energy out to cast a broad net. But then at a deeper level, he was also writing his great works. A huge correspondence he had. Hundreds of letters every week. And he would answer letters, he would write his books. Most importantly, he wrote his lessons, because as well as the public lectures, he would be giving classes. And those classes were captured. That was the essence of the teachings that we still teach to this day. And so he was giving those classes, and that was the deeper teachings in yoga, in meditation, in the techniques, in right attitudes, in all of the teachings that we have grown to know, to love, and that have changed our lives. And so he was giving those classes, and he was magnetizing a new consciousness into the West. And he was adapting, as I said, the Indian teachings to the new language, not only language of English, but cultural language that would work in America, in the West at the time. But as well as the broad teachings, as well as the deeper teachings of his writings and his classes. His real work, one might say, was training devotees, true devotees, to carry on after him. But the same training that went to them, remember, that is available to us too. We don't have him on a physical plane, but as we've found out from the passing of Swami, many of us who lived a long time with Swami have felt him more present after his passing than before. And so it is with Master. He's not confined by a body. He's not confined by a culture. He's not confined by a time 100 years ago or 50 years ago, or he's ever present and timeless. And so if we can use his great life, his great example, and most of all, his deep teachings of meditation, of control of the inner forces, and especially of Kriya, if we can use those techniques to deepen our own sensitivity, then we will find his living presence living within us now. And so 100 years ago, he arrived in America, but this very evening, tomorrow morning, he can arrive in your heart, and he can continue to dwell there and change your lives, just as he changed the lives of countless people in the West, just as he changed the lives of his disciples. It's his love, his magnetism attuned to and serving as a channel for the love and the magnetism of God and Divine Mother that is the real doer. It's the only doer. And what he did was to be a channel for the divine. Our job now is to do our part in also being a channel for the divine. But we can do that most deeply and most effectively by tuning into him, because if we allow his consciousness, his love, his joy, his wisdom to amplify our own, then we will have something that will be of great benefit to the world. And this was the mission, is the mission of the great masters, of Babaji and Jesus, was the reason that Master came, was the reason that this world change that started 100 years ago was needed and took place. I'm so deeply grateful for their compassion and their love and their sharing with us of these great, ever relevant, ever new teachings. God bless you.
Thy Master cometh today. These were the words that Master heard as a young man. He had just graduated from high school, left his home in Calcutta and gone to Benares to the Mahal Mandal Hermitage to begin his spiritual training and life. He had not yet met his master, his guru, but he was a deep seeker. And in the ashram, even though the people there were less focused on meditation, more on service, Master didn't quite fit in. He wanted to experience God, not just to do outward things. And so there began to be a tension between him and the other members of the ashram. And one day, in great anguish, spiritual anguish, he went up to a little room and he was praying and crying, "You must, my guru, you must send me my path." And then stillness came into his heart, and he heard this voice, this divine womanly voice from everywhere and nowhere saying, "Thy Master cometh today." And later that day, in Serpentine Lane, in this little small twisted lane in the streets of Benares, he met Sri Yukteswar. Well, our Master cometh today as well. He came 100 years ago to these shores of America, and he came because of our yearning. He came even though perhaps we didn't know it, but our souls were calling. Our souls were lost. Our souls were not at home in the environment in which we lived. We couldn't find compatible energy. We couldn't find people that really understood what was important to us. And so we called out, and the Master came. And he brought with him an amazing gift. I recently read a sentence in one of his old lessons that said, "These lessons are founded on tested and proven experience brought down from India's golden age to modern times." I'd never heard him use that expression, India's golden age. Well, what was India's golden age? I mean, we hear stories of incredible wealth, golden plates that people ate off of, and diamonds and rubies the size of goose eggs. But this was not India's golden age. It was not physical wealth. India's golden age was the age of truth, the age of Dharma, the age when people could easily commune with God and experience His presence, and have developed techniques to enable others to experience God, to experience self-realization. And so Master brought that golden thread from the high golden age of India to modern times. And that thread was not only the techniques of yoga, it was how to live in a way that you are in tune with God, that you feel His presence in what you do and what you think and what you say in all aspects of your life. And Master brought that golden thread to the West from the golden age of India. And he, as Jyotish was saying, he adapted these high truths so that people could live them in daily life. And in fact, when Master went back to India in 1935-36, Sri Yukteswar had been following what he had been doing, and he had some questions. He said, "Now, are you changing the teachings?" And Master said, "No, sir, I'm not changing the teachings." He said, "You are the goldsmith. You work in the pure gold. I am like the jeweler. I fashion the pure gold so that people can use it, so that people can wear it comfortably." And Sri Yukteswar chuckled, and he said, "Yes, you are doing the right thing." So this wonderful craftsman who took that gold from the high age of India and refashioned it so that we could use it and wear it. And he brought these to us. And this great movement began going out where, and you will see shortly in this video, how starting small and then bigger and bigger the crowds became, and the enthusiasm and the devotion and the understanding of what he brought. And so this golden thread that Master gave to us, let us take it as seeing it as a link from the golden age of God communion. Swamiji has said that India is really the guru of the world, that they are the ones that will show the way. And it took one of their own, one of their sons, their high developed son, to come and bring this reminder of the golden age to the West, so that we too, that balance can be achieved of the high principles and the practical application. And this is what we are seeing happen, the beginnings, just the beginnings. This morning we watched the live footage, the live streaming video from Boston Harbor that was broadcast from Boston by our devotees there. And it was so thrilling. There was a big picture of Master, and in the background you could see Boston Harbor and the sailboats going by, but there was the big picture of Master garlanded, and they were singing his chants, and they were reading from whispers. And I thought, how marvelous. 100 years ago, one man who knew no one, who had nothing, came and stood right there on that dock. And now here we all are, celebrating it and celebrating it. So let's pray that we take this golden thread that Master has given us, and that we join with others and weave our threads together to a beautiful golden cloth that can encircle the planet, that can uplift the planet. So no more will it just be a golden age of India, but it will be a golden age for the world. And this day will come. And for each of us, just like the day when Master heard the words, "Thy Master cometh today," how did that day end? He came to Sri Yukteswar, bowed at his feet, and Sri Yukteswar said, "My own, you have come to me. How many years I have waited for you." May we all in this lifetime have that blessing. Master has come. Now may we hear those words in our hearts, in our souls, where he says to each one of us, "My own, you have come to me. How many years I have waited for you." This is Master's promise. So now we're very, very happy to present to you the premiere showing of a marvelous video, which I'm sure we'll all watch many times into the future. This video was created, we were having a Zoom call with all of our leaders in America, and we were talking about plans for the 100th anniversary, and the idea began emerging, what if each different area, the East Coast, Seattle, Portland, Los Angeles, Bay Area, Sacramento, if they could each do a video of how Master served in that area, what he did. And we said, could you all do that? And they said, yes. And we said, okay, we need it in a month. They said, okay. And what they did, and you will see now without further ado, was beyond anything we expected. So let us enjoy the story of Master's coming to the West and all the different places he touched where we now have strong centers dedicated to him.
I sit by life's well in the land beyond my dreams.
America? Surely these people are Americans. This was the thought as a panoramic vision of Western faces passed before my inward view. I summoned the bewildered faculty and gave the school into its charge. I know you will keep Lahiri Mahashaya's yoga ideals of education ever to the fore, I said. I shall write you frequently. God willing, someday I shall be back. I left India in August 1920 on the city of Sparta, the first passenger boat sailing for America after the close of World War I. Yogananda was able to gain intuitive command of the English language during the trip, and even gave a lecture to his fellow passengers titled The Battle of Life and How to Fight It.
Tere charan par shish namao, He Hari Sundara, He Hari Sundara, He Hari Sundara, He Hari Sundara. Bano bano me shamal sham, Bano bano me shamal sham, गिरी गिरी में उन्नत गिरी गिरी में उन्नत उन्नत सरिता सरिता चंचल चंचल सरिता सरिता चंचल चंचल सागर सागर गंभीर है सागर सागर गंभीर है हे हरि सुंदर हे हरि सुंदर हे हरि सुंदर हे हरि सुंदर तेरे चरण पर शीर्ष नमाओ तेरे चरण पर शीर्ष नमाओ.
Yogananda stepped into an America that was at the start of the exuberant decade of the Roaring Twenties. Upon his arrival, Yogananda headed to the Greater Boston YMCA, where he stayed for a short time. On October 5th, the day before his talk at the Congress, Yogananda and other delegates were taken to Plymouth Rock to visit and commemorate the upcoming 300th anniversary of the Pilgrims' arrival in America. Yogananda moved to Unity House, where the Congress would take place. As a result of his speech at the Congress, Yogananda began to be invited to many other speaking engagements around Boston. This is where Yogananda met Alice Hazy, who became his first disciple in America and later took the spiritual name Sister Yogmata. When Yogananda saw Alice Hazy walk into the church that day, an inner voice told him that she would be the one to help start his Boston Center. Yogananda was a regular visitor at the Hazy home, where he gave many lectures and classes in the living room. It was here that one of his guru's many predictions came to pass. Once during dinner, Yogananda was served strawberries with cream and sugar for dessert. As quoted in Autobiography of a Yogi, "Sir, what a sour fruit! I could never like strawberries." My guru laughed. "Oh, you will like them, in America. At a dinner there, your hostess will serve them with sugar and cream. After she has mashed the berries with a fork, you will taste them and say, 'What delicious strawberries.' Then you will remember this day in Simla." Somerville Square is where Dr. Lewis, one of Yogananda's foremost disciples, first laid eyes on him. As he saw Yogananda cross the street in his flowing orange robe, he immediately identified the Swami as the person Mrs. Lewis had recently met and referred to. Still, Dr. Lewis was skeptical about meeting the yogi. Yet at the insistence of Alice Hazy, a respected friend and ardent truth seeker, he agreed to make an appointment to meet with Yogananda on Christmas Eve at Unity House. Dr. Lewis then posed a question. The Bible says, "If thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light." Can you explain to me the meaning of that sentence? I think I can, Yogananda replied with a smile. Would you please sit on this mat facing me? The other man did so. Yogananda then reached out and touched him on the forehead. Suddenly, Dr. Lewis saw a brilliant light in his forehead. Simultaneously with this vision, he experienced a supernal bliss. He sat for a time unmoving, immersed in deep meditation. Yogananda visited the Lewises so often that a room was set aside for him. He enjoyed cooking and delighted them with elaborate Indian dishes. During this time, he prepared to start his weekly lectures around Boston. He established his office at Huntington Chambers, where he gave weekly satsangs, in addition to organizing the work for the many upcoming engagements.
You people do not sleep correctly and allow your sleep to be disturbed by the mental movies of dreams. You subconsciously worry about unpaid bills and troubles. The reason for lying in this posture is to keep the internal organs floating in the tray of the chest and abdomen free from any pressure. But by closing the eyes and in a relaxation, I can remain asleep several nights. And by opening the eyes and recharging the body, I can keep awake several days.
Yogananda frequented Copley Square often. At the Copley Plaza Hotel, he gave a lecture on how Oriental methods can help Occidental business. At Trinity Church, he enjoyed playing the organ. And across the park, at the Boston Public Library, a most memorable encounter took place. The Master received a letter telling him he was quite wrong in sponsoring Jesus Christ in America. Don't you realize, the writer demanded, that Jesus never even lived? The letter was unsigned. A week later, he entered the Boston Public Library. There, the first thing he saw was a man seated on a bench under a large window. He went over and sitting next to him inquired, "Why did you write me that letter?" What do you mean? What letter?" "The letter in which you stated that I was wrong in sponsoring Jesus Christ in this country." But how could you possibly have known it was I who wrote the letter?" "Let's just say I have my ways," the Master responded with a smile. "And I wanted you to know that by the same power that led me to you, I know Jesus did exist and was everything the Bible says about him." They continued talking for a while about different spiritual topics.
Yogananda Jai Guru Jai Guru Jai Guru Jai Guru Jai Jai Guru Jai Guru Jai Guru Jai Paramhansa Yogananda Jai Guru Jai Paramhansa Yogananda Jai Guru Jai.
In 1923, toward the end of his initial stay in Boston, he published a book of poems titled Songs of the Soul. After a few years of establishing the teachings in Boston, Yogananda heeded the divine call to expand his mission further across the country, a mission that would eventually become a worldwide evolution of consciousness.
Paramhansa Yogananda Jai Guru
In 1924, Paramhansa Yogananda embarked on his first transcontinental tour of the United States of America. Beginning in Boston, he worked his way west through all the major cities, and San Francisco, California was one of his frequent stopping points. He taught lectures here many times at all the popular venues, sometimes even as frequently as 2 classes an evening. His topics were many and varied, to draw in spiritual seekers of all inclinations. They included such titles as The True Scientific Conception of Genesis, Divine Will Healing, How to Develop Intuition Consciously, Spiritual Marriage, Reincarnation, Relativity of Consciousness, Spiritual Food, Disembodied Souls, and Chemistry of Feelings. Many of you may recognize this iconic location as almost the spot that Yogananda stood for a famous photograph.
In 1945, Yogananda addressed the Interracial Conference at the inaugural meeting of the United Nations held in San Francisco. Speaking of the inspiration for the United Nations, Yogananda said, "If ever there have been practical contributions to the cause of world peace, they are those of Woodrow Wilson and Mahatma Gandhi. President Wilson, by the mere utterance of the plan for the League of Nations after World War I, gave the world an ideal of freedom toward which it can work. President Wilson wanted world peace. It does not matter that Mr. Wilson did not live to see the fulfillment of his dreams. His work will go on." The Palace Hotel in San Francisco was one particular venue that Yogananda returned to over the years whenever visiting the Bay Area. At the time of its construction, the Palace Hotel was the largest in the world and the grandest in San Francisco. On Yogananda's first visit in 1924, Hugo Schreiber, the hotel staff photographer, took the most famous picture of Yogananda, now known to devotees and truth seekers around the world, from the cover of Autobiography of a Yogi.
In 1925, after Yogananda had purchased the Mount Washington Hotel, he was here in San Francisco. And he made a comment to his secretary that he had only $200 in the account to fund everything. And she was pretty shocked at this, rightly so. He replied to her, "What is the matter with you? God is with us. He won't leave us now. In 7 days, he will give us all the money we need." As Yogananda was telling this story, he continued, "And sure enough, as I was walking in front of the Palace Hotel, which literally right here on this sidewalk, a man came to me and said, 'I would like to help you.' I argued, 'You do not even know me.' He replied, 'I know you from your eyes.' He wrote me a check for $27,000. That is what started the publication of the Inner Culture, as we know it, East-West magazine. In 1949, Yogananda came here to the Palace Hotel to meet with Prime Minister Nehru, who was also staying here. Yogananda attended a talk that Nehru gave, and they had a private discussion together, all here in the Palace Hotel, just one of the many times that Yogananda came here. Dr. and Mrs. Lewis accompanied Yogananda on this trip and related some humorous stories of the time they spent with him. One morning, Yogananda asked them to practice the energization exercises with him out in front of the hotel. Dr. Lewis's acute embarrassment only increased when a passing policeman took notice, and reached a zenith when Master aroused the man's suspicions by hiding behind a pillar. But his embarrassment vanished in his amusement at the policeman's continued inability to detect any illegal activity.
One evening, while trying to fall asleep at the Palace Hotel, the Lewises were lying in bed and they could hear Yogananda muttering to himself in the adjacent room, and he was repeating a new word from a Chinese restaurant that they had just gone to, and it was the evening's dish, subgum. And like a child playing with new syllables and new sounds, he kept repeating them, adding more unintelligible and just odd words to it. Subgum duff. And every time Mrs. Lewis was about to fall asleep, Yogananda would cry out, super subgum duff. And finally it culminated with super submarine subgum duff. At which point the Lewises burst into laughter, rolled out of bed, and went to join the master, where they laughed and talked and meditated for the rest of the evening.
In 1949, Yogananda's disciple Kamala Silva moved here to the Bay Area to start a center. They met a number of times in the Palace Hotel. After the very first meeting, Yogananda wrote to her, "You should have a real divine hive there with lots of divine honey in it." That started a number of other communities and centers all over the Bay Area over the decades, as it were. The Bay Area is indeed dotted with lots of divine hives and communities all throughout. Teaching centers, meditation centers, all sharing the divine honey of Yogananda's teachings.
Thou art the sweetest which I do see. In the thought my love brought, in the thought my love brought, I taste thy name, so sweet, so sweet. Devotee knows how sweet you are, devotee knows how sweet you are. He knows whom you let know, he knows whom you let know, he knows whom you let know, he knows whom you let know.
Portland was blessed with the presence of Swami Yogananda on several occasions during the years of his spiritual campaigns across America. His first visit was in October 1924 while traveling from New York to Los Angeles in the Maxwell car purchased for the trip. He gave classes and lectures for 9 days while staying at the beautiful Multnomah Hotel located on Southwest 4th and Pine downtown. Yogananda's book, Scientific Healing Affirmations, was also published in October 1924. And it was during this Portland tour that he first began using affirmations in his scientific spiritual healing presentations. He engaged the audience by reciting the powerful affirmations and having everyone repeat them phrase by phrase. All over the world, devotees now use the techniques explained by Yogananda to channel the power of God for healing in body, mind, and soul. Yogananda encouraged the use of affirmations for all kinds of healing, saying in his book, "As you utter prayers or affirmations, always believe that you are using your own, but God-given powers to heal yourself or others." One favorite from the book, "I relax and cast aside all mental burdens, allowing God to express through me His perfect love, peace, and wisdom." That little book remains one of the most popular and well-used books by Yogananda to this day. The Multnomah Hotel, where Yogananda stayed in 1924 and again in 1925, was a popular and grand hotel. Said to be the largest and most modern in the Pacific Northwest, it offered 600 rooms and occupied an entire city block. The location was prime, just a half-mile from Union Station for those traveling by train, and only 3 blocks from the riverfront. The hotel brochure claimed the magnificent lobby was the largest in the world. Including 9 U.S. presidents, the guest list boasted Hollywood stars, famous figures such as Charles Lindbergh, the Queen of Romania, and countless salesmen and tourists passing through the Rose City. The assembly hall where Yogananda gave his lectures was 50 feet wide by 90 feet long, with a seating capacity of 400. The hotel remained the largest in Portland until 1961. Then, unable to compete with the newer hotels like the Hilton, the Multnomah was closed. From 1965 to 1992, the building was used for government offices. However, in 1995 it was purchased and renovated, reopening in 1997 as the Embassy Suites Hotel, with many of its memorable features restored. Ananda Portland used the hotel for its Hope for a Better World event in July of 2017, although the original assembly hall was no longer in the floor plan. Honored guests, Nayaswamis Jyotish and Devi, the speakers, and audience were delighted to know that Yogananda had blessed the hotel and the city of Portland with the teachings of self-realization a century before. Portland and the Multnomah saw Yogananda again in June 1925. This was a West Coast tour to spread the teachings and to bring income for the new headquarters at Mount Washington in Los Angeles. In the 7 months since his last visit, Swami Yogananda's reputation had grown. Testimonials from famous students such as Luther Burbank and Leopold Stokowski increased his popularity, and his appearances filled auditoriums to capacity. While he stayed at the Multnomah, his lectures were booked at the newly built Oddfellows Hall on 10th and Salmon, close to the Central Library. The auditorium there was 4 times as large as the Hotel Assembly Hall, holding close to 2,000 people. Topics included attaining everlasting youth, training the superconscious for all-around success, the dynamic power of will, spiritual marriage, and the always popular scientific spiritual healing with healing vibrations by the Swami. The Metaphysical Hall also hosted him that week for a talk on how the teachings of India's great masters can help Americans. Before he left Portland, Yogananda wrote to friends and disciples Dr. and Mildred Lewis, "My life has become strangely busy. Every night, except for a few nights in a month, I have to lecture. I have to write books, answer myriads of letters, and prepare lectures." 6 months after Yogananda spoke on the dynamic power of will, an amusing filler piece appeared in the Morning Oregonian. Swami Yogananda swears that force of will can produce a fatigueless body. We take it that the Swami never fished a mountain creek in Oregon. Was the tired fisherman a student or skeptic? Yogananda was still traveling and lecturing frequently in the 1930s. The ad that appeared on July 19, 1933, appears to be a last-minute announcement, perhaps an unscheduled and welcome surprise for his Portland students. We don't have records of what Yogananda did between lectures, other than his remarks about his busy schedule. We do know that he loved exploring and seeing the sights wherever he traveled. It is fun to imagine where he may have explored while in Portland. Perhaps he strolled among the roses in the International Test Garden that was dedicated in 1924. June is the height of rose season, and the 1925 Rose Festival was held just a week after Yogananda's lecture series. The Grotto Sanctuary, also newly opened in 1924, may have been intriguing for the Master and his companions. Built with devotion and dedicated to Mary, a manifestation of Divine Mother, the deep vibration there is tangible. May 1925, just a month before Yogananda's lecture on willpower, The striking gold statue commemorating the strong-willed Saint Joan of Arc was unveiled in the Laurelhurst neighborhood. That would have been a wonderful photo op. Yogananda, beloved guru to millions, an avatar of Dwapara Yuga, walked the streets of Portland and blessed everyone he saw with divine love and joy. With all heaven and earth within his awareness, he must have seen the great souls destined to come and serve his work, sharing the teachings of self-realization and acting as channels for his ray.
Paramhansa Yogananda was close friends with Luther Burbank and visited him frequently at his home in Santa Rosa, California. Master writes in his book, Autobiography of a Yogi, "Magnetically drawn to this great American, I visited him again and again. One morning I arrived at the same time as the postman, who deposited in Burbank's study about 1,000 letters. Horticulturists wrote him from all parts of the world. Swamiji," he said, "your presence is just the excuse I need to get out into the garden." After spending time with him in his glorious gardens, Luther and I drove along the streets of the little town of Santa Rosa, its gardens bright with his own varieties of peach blow and Burbank roses. The great scientist had received Kriya initiation during one of my earlier visits. "I practiced the technique devoutly, Swamiji," he said. After many thoughtful questions to me about various aspects of yoga, Luther remarked slowly, "The East indeed possesses immense hoards of knowledge which the West has scarcely begun to explore." Intimate communion with nature, who unlocked to Burbank many of her jealously guarded secrets, had given him a boundless spiritual reverence. "Sometimes I feel very close to the infinite power," he confided shyly, his sensitive, beautifully modeled face lit with his memories. Then I have been able to heal sick persons around me, as well as many ailing plants. As our friendship grew deeper, I called Burbank my American saint. His heart was fathomlessly deep, long acquainted with humility, patience, and sacrifice. His little home amid the roses was austerely simple. He knew the worthlessness of luxury, the joy of few possessions. The modesty with which he wore his scientific fame repeatedly reminded me of the trees that bend low with the burden of ripening fruit. It is the barren tree that lifts its head high in an empty boast. Writing a book entitled The Training of the Human Plant, Burbank was deeply interested in education and wrote a letter endorsing the Yogoda training system of Paramhansa Yogananda as a superior alternative to what he considered narrowly intellectual education offered by most schools. He also helped Yogananda decide on the name for East-West magazine and contributed an article called Science and Civilization for its first issue. Yogananda dedicated his book, Autobiography of a Yogi, to Luther Burbank, an American saint. One of Burbank's most famous inventions was the spineless cactus. While I was conducting experiments, I often talked to the plants to create a vibration of love. You have nothing to fear, I would tell them. You don't need your defensive thorns. I will protect you. Gradually, the useful plant of the desert emerged in a thornless variety. He gave Yogananda 3 of these leaves, which grew magnificently in Yogananda's own garden. Also from Burbank's garden, this spineless cactus grows beautifully in the Ananda Sacramento gardens, even now. In 1926, Yogananda was in New York when his dear friend passed away. He writes, "In tears I thought, oh, I would gladly walk all the way from here to Santa Rosa for one more glimpse of him. Locking myself away from secretaries and visitors, I spent the next 24 hours in seclusion. The following day, I conducted a Vedic memorial rite around a large picture of Luther. Though the form of Burbank lies in Santa Rosa under a Lebanon cedar that he planted years ago in his garden, his soul is enshrined for me in every wide-eyed flower that blooms by the wayside. Withdrawn for a time into the spacious spirit of nature, is that not Luther whispering in her winds and walking her dawns?"
In showing you footage of the places Master visited in the greater Seattle area, it goes without saying that Paramhansa Yogananda is still alive and well at the Blue Lotus Temple in Seattle.
The Ananda community is only a few miles away from the Blue Lotus Temple, where about 50 residents live.
Yogananda's universal teachings and the universal spirit of his teachings are alive and well at East West Bookshop of Seattle, now located at the community.
Ananda Farm is a yoga ashram located 1 hour north from the Blue Lotus Temple on about 15 acres on Camano Island.
My song is the story of the lilacs of May.
Yogananda's work continues then here in the Seattle area through the many activities of Ananda Sangha, but let's go back in time to the places he visited in the 1920s and again in 1933. His first visit to Seattle was in the fall of 1924. He first took a 26-day cruise up to Alaska and back before commencing a 2-week stint of programs in Seattle. In 1924 and again in 1933, his lectures took place at the Masonic Auditorium in Pine Street in Seattle. In more recent years, the Masonic Hall was converted to a theater called the Egyptian Theater, but alas, during COVID-19, the theater is now closed to the public. So we're going to stand outside and look at some of the advertisements that announced his lectures.
Welcome to the Egyptian Theater in downtown Seattle, Washington. Back in 1924, when Swami Yogananda first came here to give 2 weeks of lectures, it was the Masonic Auditorium. He came back again in 1933 to this location, and at another location we'll visit in 1925. He gave lectures on reincarnation, Mahatma Gandhi, on spiritual healing, on the laws of prosperity, law of success, and he was a very popular speaker. He placed ads on the entertainment page of the Seattle Times, along with all the movies and plays taking place during that time. It was Friday, July 5th, 1925. Free lecture, The Electrifying Truth About Your Own Dynamic Powers. The Masonic Auditorium, Everlasting Youth. Unique, tomorrow, 8 p.m., the lecture treat of the year. Hear the man who has thrilled thousands. Everlasting Youth at the Masonic Temple, no admission charge, inspiring music. All are welcome. Another thrilling lecture treat of the year. Swami Yogananda, 8 p.m., no admission, inspiring musical program on the topic Everlasting Youth, unrivaled new interpretation. June 15th, 1933, again 8 p.m., here at the Masonic Auditorium. Swami Yogananda, a lecture on the surest way to prosperity, new law of success, the greatest science of healing. 8 p.m. Hear India's greatest philosopher, poet.
Yogananda returned to Seattle a year later in July of 1925 and lectured at the Odd Fellows Temple just up the street from the Masonic Hall. You can see in this advertisement a free lecture 8 p.m. tonight on Friday, July 3rd, Electrifying Truth About Your Own Dynamic Powers. The night before, on July 2nd, it was the topic of training the superconscious for all-round success. On Sunday, July 5th, he did a mystical spiritual healing with healing prayer vibrations. And that evening, Sunday, July 5th, 8 p.m., a talk on spiritual marriage.
Welcome, everyone. We're here in Seattle, Washington, and the district known as Capitol Hill. This was the preserve long, long ago in the 20s and 30s of professors and teachers at the nearby University of Washington. And this building here was the home of Edith Bissett and her husband. Edith was later christened Sister Gyanamata by Paramhansa Yogananda and is considered the most advanced woman disciple, living direct disciple of Paramhansa Yogananda. She lived here with her husband and their son Rex. Her husband was a renowned dean of the University of Washington Law School and was famous in his own right for books he wrote and so forth. But this is the home they shared. In 1924, Yogananda, on a visit to Seattle, got to meet Gyanamata here in the upstairs room where he blessed her. The story is, as I recall it, that she sent her son Rex to the lectures by Swami Yogananda nearby at the Odd Fellows Hall in order not to cast any shadow of critique on her esteemed husband's career. And so she sent her son Rex to listen to Yogananda. And then she invited Yogananda to her home where he blessed her. For many years thereafter, she kept a vase of flowers in the upstairs room where he stood and blessed her. And there they say that there is a watermark on the hardwood floor where those flowers, that vase, was kept year after year after year. Finally, in 1933, with her husband, I believe, who was perhaps ailing and probably older than she, gave permission for her to move to Mount Washington and to take sannyas vows as a renunciate there with Yoganandaji, her guru.
Master is alive and well in the greater Seattle area, even 100 years later. Joy to you.
O child of my heart, return to India. I have waited for you patiently for 15 years. Soon I shall swim out of the body and on to the shining abode. Yogananda, come.
When Yogananda, one day in 1935, received this telepathic message from his guru, Swami Sri Yukteswar, he could have sailed straight to India across the Pacific. Instead, he chooses to travel through Europe, where his feet will hallow many countries. On June 9th, 1935, he sails from New York together with his secretary, Richard Wright, an elderly disciple from Cincinnati, Miss Etty Blatch, and a Ford car that will be a surprising and important companion on their journey. The name of the ship is Europa. This journey will prove to be of vital importance for his mission to bring the first rays of self-realization and Kriya Yoga to Europe, along with the original teachings of Christ.
Their first stop was England. Visiting England was a happy experience, he wrote.
I have seen every nook and corner of England. I liked its serious literary atmosphere.
About the English, he wrote,
The English tenacity has admirable expression in a spiritual relationship. The London yoga students loyally organized themselves after my departure. holding their meditation meetings weekly throughout the bitter war years.
He lectured widely in Great Britain, finding time as well for a trip to Scotland, bringing the timeless yoga message to a people that for centuries had dominated his own country. His answer to many years of European colonialism and white supremacy was Kriya Yoga, union between science and religion, between East and West.
He then crosses the Channel to France. In a letter to his American students, he writes,
I like the French cosmopolitan spirit, a unity of all races. There is no difference to them between brown, white, or Nubian dark skins. God himself has become all the colors, as you students of self-realization know.
On his journey southward, he passes through Belgium and the Netherlands. A Dutch windmill will later adorn the famous Lake Shrine in Los Angeles. Another purpose of Yogananda's journey through Europe is to reassure all Christians of the historical authenticity of Jesus' life as recorded in the New Testament, and to dramatically display the ever-living bond between the Galilean master and his devotees. He visits two great devotees of Jesus, one living in contemporary Germany, the other a 13th century Italian saint. The report of his meeting with Teresa Neumann of Bavaria in chapter 39 of the autobiography of a yogi continues to inspire many spiritual seekers. In it we find Yogananda's intuitive understanding of Teresa's capacity to live without food. He says to her,
I see that energy flows to your body from ether, sun, and air. Your sacred life is a daily demonstration of the truth uttered by Christ. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of God.
Yogananda then explains in his footnote that the mouth of God is the medulla oblongata. Following this same principle, Yogananda and his disciples would introduce his 39 energization exercises to spiritual seekers in Europe, helping them to live more by pure energy and less by bread alone. Teresa responds, saying, I'm so happy to know you understand how I live. The following Friday, Yogananda, entering himself into higher consciousness, observes Teresa's ecstatic reliving of the Passion of Jesus, during which time the signs of the stigmata appear on her own body. He writes,
As I was in attunement with her, I began to see the scenes of her vision. She was watching Jesus as he carried the cross amidst the jeering multitude. Suddenly, she lifted her head in consternation. The Lord had fallen under the cruel weight. The vision disappeared.
From Konnersreuth, Yogananda and his friends travel south, through Austria and Switzerland to Italy, land of art and culture, blessed by the lives of innumerable saints. His primary destination is Assisi, the birthplace and medieval home of the universally known and loved Saint Francis.
Yogananda was entrusted by his gurus to revive the original teachings of Jesus, highlighting his emphasis on inner communion with God and helping his followers to experience Christ consciousness. Yogananda was especially drawn to Saint Francis, who actually experienced the living presence of Jesus and the joy of communion with him. He is the first known saint who, like Therese centuries later, relived the passion of Jesus and received the marks of the stigmata. The saint would often appear to him at his hermitage in California, inspiring him to write his poem, God, God, God.
From the depths of slumber as I ascend the spiral stairways of wakefulness, I will whisper, whisper, God, God, God.
During his visit to Assisi, Yogananda again had visions of the joyful saint, and as he writes in his travel journal, together with Jesus, the three of them walked hand in hand through the streets of the city and the pathways of the saint's hermitage on Mount Subasio. He speaks fondly of Saint Francis as his patron saint. Saint Francis was born, lived, and died here, and his body rests in the magnificent basilica, built in the 4 years immediately after his passing. Yogananda writes to a disciple in America.
As I was visiting his living tomb and put my head on the shrine step, Saint Francis appeared to me. Then I saw a tunnel of eternity in which he disappeared. The entire cellar beneath the church was replete with his vibrations. Saint Francis is one of my loved saints, with whom I commune and have communed.
The blessings of these great masters have remained and permeate the entire area around Assisi. It is here that Yogananda's direct disciple, Swami Kriyananda, establishes in 1987 the European headquarters of the Ananda Worldwide Movement, the first World Brotherhood colony on European soil. More than 100 residents from a dozen countries live here today, creating a model community based on Yogananda's vision for the future. A place where people can commune with God, a simple, unified life with high ideals, where home, job, friends, church, school, recreation are all in one place. A dynamic example to the rest of the world that spiritual principles really work. Thousands of truth seekers from around the world visit Ananda Europe each year to study and experience Yogananda's universal teachings, experience the blessings that he and Saint Francis continue to bestow, to receive training as teachers of self-realization, to discover the spiritual friendship that unites all nationalities, races and religions, and to spread the light of Kriya Yoga and self-realization in their own home cities.
Ananda para mí es vitalidad, energía, vida.
Ananda для меня радость общения, любовь, принятие, открытие, инсайты. Я вас люблю!
Squasila radость нас все мы братья, in Dio siamo tutti fratelli.
On his way back to the United States from his sojourn in India, Yogananda makes one last European stop in England, where he leaves us with this message and his eternal blessings.
If the Western brothers only could learn the methods of the yogis, then they would learn to live 100 years in perfect health, happiness, and great success. I will go into the state of superconscious bliss by lifting my eyes, higher inner relaxation, and controlling my heartbeat.
Oh, I will come again and again, Crossing a million crags of suffering, with bleeding feet I will come, if need be 1,000,000,000 times, so long as I know one stray brother is left behind.
Los Angeles, Yogananda used to say, is the Benares of the West, even as the city of Benares in India is the holy city of the Hindus. And every time I go to Los Angeles, I feel beneath all the traffic and the hubbub exceptionally high vibrations.
At Mount Washington, he once told us, I have meditated on every spot of these grounds. It was, as I recall, sometime during August or September of 1949 that Paramhansa Yogananda acquired his last and most beautiful ashram property. This SRF Lake Shrine, as Master named it, nestles serenely in the arms of a broad curve formed by Sunset Boulevard. Soon after Master obtained this property, he invited the monks out to see it. Walking its grounds, we were wonderstruck at their beauty. Happily, Master predicted, this will be a showcase for the work. I am sending the divine light all through this lake, he said. Afterward, he said to us, this is holy water now. Whoever comes here in future will receive a divine blessing. He was scheduled to attend a banquet that evening, March 7th, at the Biltmore Hotel in honor of the Indian ambassador, Binoy Arshen. Master had asked me to attend the banquet with Dick Hames, the popular singer and movie actor. Imagine, he said, I've taken a room at the Biltmore. That's where I first started in this city. Then again, he repeated, wish me luck. And he had said, when I go, I will die with my boots on. And he said, I know that when I die, I will be talking of my America and my India. And that's exactly what his subject was. And he spoke very dearly. It was a big function. Several hundred people were there. And he read his poem, My India. And the last words of that poem were, I am hallowed, my body touched that sod. And the word sod became a long drawn-out sigh, and he turned and slipped to the floor and left his body. And people, there was a shock went through the whole audience, and somebody next to me, I'd been writing his words, so I hadn't watched it closely. And I said, what happened? He said somebody said he fainted. I said, no, he wouldn't faint. It's too perfect a way to go. And he told us he was ready to leave his body. He'd finished his work. And so that's how it happened.
So Master says in his poem, God's Boatman, oh, I will come again and again, crossing a million crags of suffering. With bleeding feet I will come, if need be 1,000,000,000 times, so long as I know one stray brother is left behind.
A love that calls to us to fly.
Thank you all for joining us, and thank so many who made this deeply inspiring time possible. Let's close now with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, great masters, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Shri Yukteswar, beloved Guru, Paramhansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, beloved friend and guide, Swami Kriyananda, we humbly bow to you all. Our souls offer their gratitude at your feet for coming to these shores, for beginning a world mission that has uplifted the lives of countless individuals. But more, we are profoundly grateful for coming into our lives, from leading us from darkness into light, for showing us where our true home is. And may the day come where we see you standing before us saying, my own, you have come to me. Om. Peace.